went wacky. Sorry. Yeah. Facebook was like, no way, you must not. Hello. I hope everybody's having a fabulous writing day. I wanted to talk about grammar to make the writers in this group feel comfortable asking their questions. I want for us to take away the shaming that happens with grammar. We all use language to communicate, whether we're working on our books or we're just chatting with our friends, and there's no reason we should feel intimidated about using our own language. We speak it, we own it. We all have an equal right to speak it and own it. So what really bugs me when the conversation about grammar comes up is that it tends to turn into like an elite. Like there's this elite group of people and they know all the rules and they pass down those rules and they judge the rest of us. I personally know I make a lot of errors that I don't even know I'm making. When I went to publish my first ebook, I sent my book to an editor and she was fantastic. I loved working with her. And she told me something I was doing incorrectly, that it wasn't like one mistake. It wasn't like, oh, on page 17, I did this wrong. I have been making this mistake wrong in everything I was writing for my entire life. Like I just didn't know this rule. I wasn't using it correctly. And it was such an eye opener. So the conversation I want to have about grammar is the way we can stop being afraid of it. So I want to hear your questions. If there's something that you have been dying to ask, please go for it. And I also want to take you through what are, in my opinion, the top 10 goofs that we make that make people turned off to our writing. Even though I don't want to feel judgmental about grammar, the reality is people are judgmental about grammar, right? We call them grammar Nazis. I mean, that's pretty severe, right? So I want to help you when you're looking back through your work, focus your energy on looking for certain key mistakes that you might be making just because you have like a slip of the finger or, your brain is distracted, or that might be things you just didn't know the rule for, and look for those in particular. And the goal of that is so that when you're writing, you're not feeling terrified, like, oh my gosh, everything is a landmine and I don't even know what mistakes I'm making. Limit your focus to just these couple of things, because the reality is these are the kinds of mistakes that people who are going to be judgmental are more likely to judge us on. So this is like the whole approach is the people who are like, no, oh my gosh, you made the mistake, I'll put down your book. How can we appease them? So that's the whole point. Okay, so I'm going to count down from 10 down to 1, 1 being like, oh my gosh, this is the kind of thing that will make people stop reading your blog and stop reading your Facebook posts and put down your book. So make sure you don't do it. And I would love to hear from you guys, again, what your questions are. And if you have a question about one of the elements I'm going over, please, by all means, stop and ask me. And you can I'm going to be doing my top 10 off of a PDF that is available for you over on allwriterswelcome.com/grammar. So I'll put the link in the comments. Okay, but I'm going to start with number 10. Number 10, grammar goof, the one that will make people just not want to read what you write anymore and not take you seriously, is using hyphens instead of dashes. They're just lines, right? Like, why are people so angry about this? But the hyphen is that bottom line, like, so on your keyboard next to the 0, if you don't hit shift and you just hit that one line, you've got a hyphen. And a hyphen is for like connecting words. Like, if you write my 2-year-old daughter did something super cute, you'd use the hyphen. And the dash is the longer one, and it's for interrupting a sentence. And you might be going like, well, who cares? They're all just lines. I totally get you. But this is the kind of thing, it's super simple for you to fix. And again, is the kind of thing somebody else might look at and go, oh, this person doesn't know what a dash is. Or, this person didn't proofread. All right. So that is number 10. Number 9, leaving a sentence unfinished. And you might go like, who would do that when they're writing? But it's easier to do, and it kind of can trip us up if you have a really, really long what seems like a sentence, like you got a lot of words and a lot's going on, but then if you look at the end, you realize you never finished the thought. And the big thing to watch out for is if you start a sentence with when or while. These are the words that tend to, well, when you use a when or a while at the beginning, you're talking about two things, right? Like, when you were at the mall, I was over at the video arcade. Or, while I was gardening, a fire truck went by. But the problem is if you start with a when or a while and then you have a lot of details and a lot is going on, that's when it's easy to forget to finish and to give us that second thought. So that's the kind of thing where if you go back through and just do a quick read through, you should be able to catch. So easy for you and keeps the judgers off your back. All right. The number 8 grammar goof to avoid is overusing the word myself. And I think myself has like a reputation for being fancier or more correct somehow. Like there are some words that seem like they own mansions and they live at the top of the hill, and all the rest of us are like, oh, did you see myself? It came to the farmer's market today and it bought only organic veggies. There's nothing special about the word myself. It's not any better than all of the rest of the words. And it only has limited jobs. So most of the time, you're just going to avoid it. Times to use it, only 3 times. If you're doing something to yourself, like, oh, I could have kicked myself for forgetting your birthday. If you're emphasizing that it's your opinion, like, well, I myself prefer MailChimp, but you might like, I don't know, Constant Contact. Or if you are emphasizing that you did something alone. Look, Mom, I made it myself. So if you're not using, if you're not in one of those scenarios, ignore it. You don't need this word. But it's the kind of thing that gets like people who know language, it gets their panties all in a ruffle. That's not the expression. It gets their panties in a wad. I don't even know. It makes them unhappy. So if you can just avoid it, then you will appease them. The number 7 grammar goof is sticking a comma just right into the middle of a sentence and ending up breaking up your subject and your verb. So ending up breaking up the person who's doing the action or the thing that's doing the action from the action itself. And this one is usually something that comes about because commas are just complicated. Did you guys know there are over 50 different rules for how and when to use commas? Like, no wonder they're so frustrating. No wonder it's hard to figure out whether they're in the right spot or not. But do you know what the number 1 rule for commas is? Don't use them unless you know what rule you're following. So in other words, if you're looking at your sentence and you're like, ooh, I don't know, there's kind of a lot, maybe I need a comma, don't give into the doubt. Don't give into that feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'll just stick this in here. Leave it out unless you've got a particular reason for it. And here's the interesting thing about people who like to correct grammar. I can say this, you guys, I'm totally a recovering grammar Nazi. I can say this from my personal experience. People who like to be, let me put it this way, not people who like to correct grammar, but people who like to be mean about correcting grammar are looking for like, how are you using the thing that only I know about because I'm special in the wrong way? So if you leave out a comma, somebody who's likely to judge you on your writing is like, oh, whatever, this person doesn't use comma. Nobody knows how to use commas. But if you put in the comma in the wrong spot, then the grammar judges are like, oh, the sacred comma has been misused and we must go after the person who has brought it shame. There's like this feeling of you're not allowed to use those tools. Those are my tools, which is not true. We're all allowed to use language. It's here for all of us. Like, I do not subscribe to this idea that there are certain special elite people who get to use commas. But the advantage is, since we know like the psychological profile of our grammar judgers, we can avoid their judgment. And just, if you don't have a specific, like, oh, I remember, Mrs. Lewinsky in 7th grade said to use a comma to separate 3 items in a series. If you're not like rocking one of those rules, just leave it out and you're better off. All right, so that brings us to the number 6 grammar goof that drives the grammar judgers crazy, and it is changing your verb tense. And it's something that is really challenging, because in the course of your story, you might use like different tenses as you talk about things that could happen or that might have happened. I mean, there is some wiggle room, but be on the lookout for things that you can spot. So here's an example. I'm all alone in the drab room. My heart is pounding. I can hear voices, but I can't understand what they said. Can you guys hear that at the end? Like it's going on now, and at the end, I switched to something already happened. And the way I would correct that would be, I'm all alone in the drab room. My heart is pounding. I can hear voices, but I can't understand what they're saying. And this might be something that it takes a lot of practice to build an awareness of. So this is one of those that you're probably not going to, if you have a habit of switching tenses, you're probably not going to break that habit all in one go. Oh, Rosie's saying, I'm so rusty with grammar. Most of us are. Okay, I'm totally going to interrupt myself. So you guys, I was a classroom teacher at the beginning of my career, and I had to teach grammar. And I've always been a language person, and I've just always loved language. That's my jam. I was never any good at math. I can't draw except for stick figures. I really like language. It's something that appealed to me. So I was like, rules of language, let's dive in. Let's learn all we can. And I was the biggest grammar nerd ever. And I was keeping up that skill because I was teaching it. I was teaching kids to diagram sentences, and, like we were learning all the parts of speech. And, I've always been that person that people call like, Megan, I'm writing a thing. And do I do a semicolon there or what? And I'm like, I'll keep you on the phone for 15 minutes and explain to you the rule. So watch out. Call me at your own risk. But I had all of those rules at the ready because I was using them. And as I moved into being a writing coach, yeah, I was still helping people with their grammar, but I was no longer teaching grammar. And then in my writing practice, I moved into older students and adults, and I was doing a lot less of teaching the nuts and bolts. And even with the younger students, I was doing more about teaching them their writing process and self-expression. And all of those rules that I used to have at the ready started to kind of like flit out of my head. And now I find myself having to look up a lot more. I have, I keep grammar resources just right on my desk. There's the internet. I don't know all the stuff there is to know. I have to look it up. Now when people call me up and ask me questions, sometimes I say, hold on, I have to double check. I'm pretty sure it's this. So if you're feeling rusty, there's a very good reason for that. For all of the things we know, it's like use it or lose it. And if you're not having to explain the rules of language on a pretty constant basis, there's a good chance that they're just not at the top of your brain. And that's totally fine. There are so many resources out there. You can look online. You can always ask us in this group. You can come to the All Writers Welcome Academy and join and get on our grammar forum. Oh, I'm so excited. We're building that right now. And, you eventually will have the help of a skilled editor. But, again, my whole point is let's just pick 10 things. And if you could only focus on these, it would go a long way toward keeping the grammar judges off your back. And Philo's saying, so guilty of switching tenses. Yeah, and there are times where you're writing and you're like, well, wait, what tense am I even in? Things have already happened, and then it gets super complicated if you're like writing in the past, but then things happened in the distant past, right? And you're like, oh. So that one is not, again, I don't mean to say like that's an easy one, but start looking for it. Start building your habit. Carrie's saying, I don't know which tense I'm in when I write. I never figured out what was what. Oh goodness. Well, it's basically, you're writing as if things have already happened. He went there, he did this, or you're writing there. It's in, the present right now. Probably very few books are written in the future, but Carrie, that's the kind of, thing that you might be doubting yourself more on. So here's something else to point out. Just because we don't know the name or the rule, it doesn't mean we're doing something incorrectly. You guys, the rules of grammar are completely made up after the fact. They are descriptive. So people have been talking forever, right? And then at a certain point, they started writing things down. And other people looked at what was said and what was written, and they're like, what's the pattern? How does this work? If I want to make a question, what does that sound like? If I want to make a statement, what does that sound like? So if you find yourself going like, oh my gosh, how could I possibly write if I don't know these terms she's talking about? You are writing, you are using language already. The rules are supposed to be there to help us describe the pattern so that we know whether we're following them or not. So Carrie, I would say don't panic about it. And this might be something, I hear there's some possibility that you may be joining us in the Academy. So this would be the kind of thing you could totally bring to a live writing call and say like, hey, in this passage, is this good? I feel like I might be switching tenses. What's up with that? Okay. Ooh, Mandy's saying swapping past and present tense was something I did in my book. I didn't realize I was doing it until it was pointed out to me. So Mandy, once it was pointed out, did you feel like it made sense, or was that a place where you're like, I don't get what you're talking about? Because that sometimes happens too, where somebody even points out the mistake we're making and we're like, I don't see it. You know, as if you told, I don't know, somebody like me with absolutely no artistic sense, like, oh no, that's this kind of composition versus that kind. I would still just go, I don't know. Okay, Mandy, I'm curious to hear. Ooh, this is interesting. Mike says grammar is a perishable skill. Mike, I'm not sure I know what you mean, but if it's what I think, then I agree. If you mean that it changes or that it kind of goes away, it's true. Language evolves. And we're going to get to one of these on the top 10 list. You guys are going to say, what? That's not a rule. That's crazy. Everybody talks like that. But there are the rules that are written, and we as writers are kind of held to a higher standard. And so even if everybody has kind of moved on and is doing something different in actuality, we kind of have to toe the line. We have to stay trying to use those rules, just because people will go, oh, how can you be a writer if you don't even know that? Yep, use it or lose it. That's definitely the experience I've had. Okay, so number 6 was changing verb tense. Number 5, using apostrophes to form plural words. I think apostrophes and commas are equally feared and loathed, and you know, they're basically the same thing, just one's turned upside down. But a really easy way to incur the wrath of a grammar judger is to use an apostrophe to form a plural word, like write potato and then put apostrophe in S and say, you know, I need potatoes at the store. And like commas, just skip the apostrophe unless you've got a specific reason for using it. Again, if you're writing a Facebook post or if you're writing a blog post and you miss the apostrophe as opposed to putting in an extra one, people are far less likely to notice. So you know, if you're like, I'm not sure what they're for and how to use it, leave them out. Seriously, you're better without them than you are with extra ones. Oh, okay. So Mandy's saying in relation to the tenses, it made complete sense. I'll never advise someone against an editor. Oh, the editor is actually who pointed out my switching back and forth. Now I'm very observant. Always get an editor. Yeah, that would be mine too. And Mandy, I don't know if you were, if you saw what I said earlier, if you were already on the call, but yeah, I had my editor point out to me that I had been misusing something my entire life. Like I was just wrong. I had no knowledge of this thing. She was so helpful about it, like fantastic about it. And now I'm like, oh, that's on my radar. It's something I didn't even know. I didn't know, right? All right. The number 4 top 10 grammar goof is using a word that looks nearly identical but isn't the same as the word you actually want. And I think the one I see most commonly is people use were, W-E-R-E, when what they really want is we're, which is W-E apostrophe R-E, which of course is short for we are. So this would be a place where just reading back through what you've written can help. Like if it was just a typo or if it was just kind of a brain fart, reading back through. And this could also be just the one thing you're going to ask me about and say, wait, what's the difference? And how do I spell each of those? And that's something I didn't know before, and now I know it. But if you can, you know, focus on just that one word pairing, were versus we're, that's probably the most common one. Joanne's asking if I took a look at what she sent to me. Did you send me writing? I'm not sure. Okay. The number 3 goof is overusing I And just like myself, I is one of those words that gets undue respect. Oops, oh, I lost my curtain. I have a magic Velcro system. So now you guys get to see me from the front and the back. So people put I up on a pedestal, and I have a theory of this, because here's what happened to me when I was a kid. I remember coming to talk to my mom, who was talking to the neighbor, and I was like, Mom, me and Janine want to go in the pool. Me and Janine want to go here. We want to have fun. Me and my friend, we want to do this. And the neighbor looked at me and said, Janine and I. And there was born a fear of the word me for the rest of my life. Did anybody else have an experience like that? Like a formative experience, or somebody corrected you and you're like, oh, me is a bad word. I should never use me. Am I the only one? I have like such a vivid memory of that. Anyway, me is not a bad word. And I is a doer. So the question you need to ask yourself is, am I doing something, like I am going to the store, or is something being done to me? Send it to me, give it to me, talk to me. All right. So you sent me a story. I'm not currently doing, here and there we do offer like free mini sessions or free critiques, Joanne, but we don't have anything like that going on right now. So I wouldn't have looked at your story. So sorry if you're waiting on a response from me, but yeah, we will definitely let you guys know if you're on our newsletter. We, from time to time, Ella and I offer very cool free things like a free writing critique of part of your story, or a free review of your book cover, things like that, but they're not ongoing. Okay, so does anybody else have a okay, cool, thanks, Joanne. I'm sorry if you're waiting on me for that. But did anybody else have a story like that with me and I, or am I the only one? Am me the only one? Okay. Moving on to the number 2 one. All right, you guys are going to think I'm making this up. You seriously are going to think I'm making this up. But the number 2 goof that will drive grammar judges crazy is using they, them, and their for one person. And you're going to say, what, Megan? People do this all the time. And if you're like, wait, I don't even know what you're talking about. Here's an example. Everyone has a right to their own opinion is not grammatically correct. Everyone has a right to her own opinion is. And guys, we got so screwed. In other languages, you can have a pronoun that's gender neutral, that's not just for things, it's for people. We don't have one in English. We totally missed out on this. It doesn't, what? We got we got a raw deal. And they is plural. So here's what, like, this is so cool, because here's how the rules of grammar are like linked to culture. Way back in the day when they were writing down these rules, the people who wrote them were like, oh, if you want to refer to somebody in the singular and you're not sure, it's just like everybody, it's a general, just use he, because, men are the only ones who count. What? Right? Totally unacceptable point of view now. So grammatically on the books, it still tells us if you're talking about somebody and we don't know who that person is, right? Like, did anybody claim this? And you're like, who's anybody? I don't know. It could be, somebody of any age, of any gender. So the thing that's correct on the books is to use he, but that's not socially or culturally acceptable anymore. So whenever you can, make it more than one person. So using the plural, then you can use they, and then that's gender neutral. So, instead of asking about like one person, ask, do people in general do this? And you're like, oh, I can use they, and I'm off the hook. And this is one that you're going to hear wrong all the time, and it's not fair, because everybody gets to use they, and I'm the only one who's not allowed to use it. But again, we're writers. We're held to a higher standard. And this is the kind of thing that if you put in a newsletter or on a blog post or in your book, 97.4% of people won't think anything of it. We're seeing it in print, we're seeing it on blog posts. You're like, oh, that's cool. But there will be just that handful who go, I'm not reading something from this author because it hasn't been properly edited and this person doesn't know the rules of grammar. So it's not the end of the world, right, to disappoint people who are angry. But you don't want to lose readers not based on your content. You don't want to lose people because they are judging your language. Philo asked who made these rules. A lot of different people at a lot of different times. And again, they're descriptive, right? It was people looking at the way we speak English and then describing it. And we live in a very interesting time because language is changing more rapidly than rules are changing. And that's probably always been true, but we're seeing printed language so frequently, like on the web and in blog posts. So it's really, and in all the ebooks that you guys are publishing, it's really a case of the rules need to catch up, and they haven't. I've got some solutions. Nobody's called me up. I invented a pronoun I think would help out a lot, but I don't know. No grammar committee. No grammar committee asked my opinion. Okay, so we're about ready to go to the number one grammar goof. And before we go there, I want to mention two things. One, get a resource. Get any resource. Go online, look at Amazon, quick grammar book. I want to make a recommendation. This one is like right here by my desk. Oh, my camera's going to be backwards. Right here by my desk all the time, or maybe not. It's called Right Source. From the cover, you might think this is made for middle school students, and you would be right. And this is my go-to favorite grammar resource because it's just simple, clear explanations. I'm like, oh, where, is that a good place for a comma? Is that a good place for quotation marks? So I highly recommend grab yourself any kind of resource. This is a great one, Right Source. And for those of you with kids, you can buy it from your kid, buy it for your kids and then steal it to look at yourself. And the other thing I recommend is don't be afraid to ask your questions. A lot of there's this terrible thing that happens where there's a lot of judgment about grammar. So then people don't feel comfortable asking their questions. And it doesn't happen with other things. People aren't afraid to say oh gosh, how can I make the scene more exciting? Or, how can I make my character seem this way? But when it comes to grammar, people are like, oh, I can't, I'm going to get made fun of. You are so safe to ask any question. I'm not guaranteeing I know the answer because I told you I've lost a lot, but you are so safe to ask any question. Please feel free to tag me in this group when you have questions. And also, as I mentioned, you guys, in the All Writers Welcome Academy, our subscription program, we have a grammar forum. And what will happen in that forum is you put in your question and then people get in and give you suggestions. I get in there regularly and say, oh, well, what about this? Or try that, or, clarify your question for me so I can give you the best answer. So ask questions. That is so, so helpful for learning. And okay, now I'm ready to get into the number one grammar goof. And I bet some of you know what it is because it's a pet peeve. And I admit this one is still a pet peeve for me. I'm no longer judgy about it. I no longer treat it like a moral infraction. I used to. I've told you I'm a recovering, grammar judger. But it still irks me because I think it's the kind of thing you can train yourself to spot. So I guess this kind of leads to why do people get so angry about misuse of language and misuse of grammar? Some people who do know the rules forget that others don't know the rules. And so they might go around thinking, well, you just didn't care to proofread, right? And that's definitely not the message you want to send to people who are reading your book, who are reading your blog posts, who are reading your newsletter, who are reading your Facebook posts. You don't want them to think that you didn't care enough just to do a quick proofread. And it might not be the case, right? You might have made the goof because, like me, there's that rule and I would just went, oh, I never learned it, right? I could have proofread 17 times and I still never would have caught it because I didn't know. But for this one, for the number one, get in the habit of proofreading for this. And if you don't do anything else to learn about grammar, do this one thing and you will have fewer people turned off. And the number one grammar goof is using the wrong homophone, and homophones are just words that sound the same. And it's a really common mistake because most of us, as we're writing or typing, we're hearing it in our heads. So we're like, I want to come to your birthday party, right? And my brain just hears your, and it types why are you are? And then I type another sentence and it's like, oh, you're really close to me. We should carpool to the birthday party. And my brain still hears your, and I still type out why are you are. Well, it's not until I think about what I meant there that I realize what I'm really saying is you are. And so I need to go back and I need to make it YOU''RE. And if that seems like a lot of work to go back and reread your post, it's not though, right? Like going back and reading one time. Now, you may not get it because you may need to build the habit. This may not be something that's on your radar. It may be something you never learned. It may be something that you learned and forgot. It may be that you're like, I just get so overwhelmed by the rules that, I don't even know what to pay attention to. But I'm telling you, if this is the only one you remember, the only one you take away, it will keep the judgers off of your back, because ultimately what they're responding to is a feeling like, again, you didn't care. You didn't care enough to send the very best, right? The old Hallmark ad. All right, that was a lot. It was a lot and it was abstract. So if you guys want it less abstract, all in one spot, go to allwriterswelcome.com/grammar and you can get the top 10 grammar goofs with examples of how not to do it and how to do it the correct way in a free downloadable PDF. Okay. So again, my goal here is I want to be available as a resource, and maybe that means I can answer a question. Maybe it means I can point you in the direction or say like, hey, page 479 of RightSource as what you need. But there is absolutely no reason to feel embarrassed about asking questions about language. We all in this group are asking questions about our writing process, about our publishing process. This is just one piece, and there's, I don't know. There's just such a habit of people thinking that they have a right to be mean when they are pointing out to us our grammatical mistakes. And you guys know our one rule in this group is be kind. It means be kind about everything. Let's learn. Let's get better at writing together. And yeah. But I love geeking out about language. So if you have a question and you want to know why, oh my gosh, I will totally tell you everything I know about it. Carrie says, my main issue is run-on sentences, so I have to really slow down and reread to notice if I'm stopping to catch my breath during the sentence or not. Oh, okay, that's a good strategy. But you know what, Carrie? That one is something definitely an editor would help you with. And so you would, have that extra support, and it sounds like something that's starting to be on your radar. And, that's really what it's about. It's about looking for the places where we know we're going to need some extra help. All right, guys, I will wrap because this has been a really long one. Thanks so much for joining me on this. Thanks everybody who left a question or comment, and let's keep the conversation going. If you have more questions about language or things you want to clear up, by all means, share them. And I will catch you guys in the group. And for those of you in the academy, I'll catch you in the academy. All right, take care. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.